Hello grade 7s! Welcome to your first Ed Puzzle video. Now in this video today, for history, we are going to be talking about the early humans. And the great thing about Ed Puzzle videos is that if you want to pause the video, you can. If you've missed something and you want to go back and watch it again, that is all up to you. You have the freedom to take a snack break if you want, or go for a little walk, come back, and I will still be here explaining things. All right, let's get started. As I mentioned, we are talking about the early humans today, and our learning objective is to explore how humans lived during the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras. And I think that you guys have some knowledge about this time period already from Upper L, and we're going to begin with the Paleolithic age. So this is the Stone Age, and although there were no written records during this time, we call this time prehistory, before humans began to write and record what was happening. Scientists have learned a great deal about how these prehistoric people lived. They've learned how early human beings lived and what important discoveries were made. Scientists also think they know why people moved out of Africa to other parts of the world. So about 1.75 million years ago, the Earth started to cool a lot. And that actually caused people to migrate from Africa. Ice sheets grew, the sea level fell, and all this land that had been underwater had started to appear. That meant people were able to migrate or make their way around the desert of northern Africa and across the land bridges. Scientists call the first age in which people lived the Paleolithic Age or Old Stone Age. It lasted from about 2.3 million years ago until about 10,000 years ago. And during this time, people obtained their food by hunting and gathering. Paleolithic people lived in small bands or groups of about 30 members. So that's about the size of the Upper L East classroom. So if you can imagine them as a band of people living during the Paleolithic Age. When the food supply was good, the bands could grow to maybe 40 or 50 members. Most of the group members lived to be no more than 20 or 25 years old. More than half of the children died from illnesses or were killed by animals before their first birthdays. The people within a group lived and worked together, they shared their food, they fed and cared for people who became injured or sick, so they were very small communities. Each band searched for food within an area known as its home territory. This is about 2 square miles or 5 square kilometers for every band member, so it's not a very large area. There were campsites, various places throughout their home territory. The band stayed at a campsite until the available food supply was used up and then moved. So if there were no, animals in the area, then they would follow where the herd went. If all the vegetation had been picked over, then of course they would have to move on. So I'm sure you've heard about hunters and gatherers. Women and children gathered berries, nuts, fruits, and eggs out of bird and turtle nests. They even poked sticks into bees' nests to get honey and into the ground to dig roots. Men of the group obtained the meat. They caught fish using their bare hands, and they hunted small animals with sticks and stones. Occasionally, they were able to kill a large animal that was too young, too old, or too badly hurt to run away. A good kill meant that the group would have enough meat to last for several days. So that is how they lived and survived. Now, let's talk about tools. So life for hunters and gatherers became easier when they learned how to make tools. At first, the only tools people had were sticks and stones, which of course they would just find on the ground. Soon, they learned to shape their own stones to make them more useful. Among the earliest shaped stones are these pebble tools. You can see the pictures right now. Pebble tools were made from pebbles. They're about the size of your fist, so squeeze a fist right now, and that's about the size of what you can see on the screen. To make them, the tool maker would hit one pebble with another, and that way you could chip it down and get a sharp edge. Sometimes the chips that came off were large enough you could use them as knives to cut meat or to cut into fur. And then later on they started making some bigger tools from larger rocks as well. All right, let's talk about shelter and clothing. Early people usually camped out in the open. I do have a picture of just a small sort of fortification here. They protected themselves from the wind by digging pits in the ground or by crouching in dry riverbeds. They also took to shelter under an overhanging rock or piled up brush. At first, early people used caves only for such emergencies as escaping from a sudden storm or a large animal. But by about 100,000 years ago, people in China, Western Europe, and even southwestern Asia were living in caves most of the time. So that's where we get the idea that they are cavemen. After hunters began killing the large animals, they found that the animal skins could be used for protection and warmth. They scraped the skins clean and then laid them out in the sun to dry. Later, people discovered that pounding fat into the skin while it was drying would make it softer, more comfortable. At first, people wrapped the skins around themselves. Later, they learned how to fasten the skins together. Clothing made a big difference where people lived. Before they had clothing, most people stayed in areas where they were warm and dry. However, once they had clothing to protect them from the weather, they were able to move into areas that were cooler and wetter. So something we'll talk about in class is this migration of people. They're moving all around the world, and that's something we certainly see with the Neolithic Age. Now, the Neolithic Age, you might think of it sort of as the Stone Age. And why it is so important to historians and to people like us today is because what they discovered we call the agricultural revolution. Of course, agriculture, you think of farming. So they learned how to farm, they learned how to keep animals, and that changed how humans lived. So let's talk about that a little bit. So two important discoveries brought on the Neolithic Age. One was learning to grow food, the other was learning to herd animals. Experts believe, remember we don't have any historical accounts, no one kept diaries, they didn't write anything down for us. So experts believe that people discovered that seed from wild grains such as wheat and barley could be planted and harvested. This probably came about when they noticed that new shoots had grown from spilled grains. Scientists believe that agriculture developed independently in different parts of the world. So I was just talking about China, southwestern Asia, Western Europe. Different places around the world, they grew different things. So in southwestern Asia, they grew wheat and barley. Eastern Asia, millet, rice, soybeans. In Mexico, think about Mexican food. They grew corn, if you think about corn tortillas, squash, potatoes. They even grew peanuts too. People probably learned that they could herd animals when a hunting band built fences to enclose a herd of wild animals they had chased into a ravine. The hunters killed one animal at a time, saving the rest for later. Soon captured animals began to lose their fear of people and became domesticated, or another word for that is tamed. And the hunters became herders. In time, Neolithic people were breeding animals to improve the animals' qualities. People also began using certain animals such as donkeys, camels, and llamas as pack animals. Now, all of this is so important because learning how to farm, learning how to herd, increased people's quality of life. So when you're thinking about the Paleolithic Age, right, the Stone Age, people are living in caves. It's just small groups of people. They're scraping by to survive off the land. Now they've learned how to grow crops. They can keep animals and they can breed them, and so they have a meat source at all times. This means that we're going to see a boom in population. We're going to see a lot more humans around. So experts think that because there's more food available, the population or the number of people began to grow. There were about 5 million people in the world in 8,000 BC. Within 4,000 years, the population grew to about 90 million. Holy smokes, that's a huge increase in just 4,000 years. And this is going to change how people live. So before, remember when I was talking about the Paleolithic age, people would live in small groups and they would move around. Well, we have small villages forming. And I have a picture of one right here. It's one of the oldest known settlements in the world. This is called, actually I think it's called Çatalhöyük, which is in modern day Turkey. So now we have communities of people growing, they're living together from about 150 people maybe to 200 people. They're all settling in one place. They might have crops around their shelter, and then they might have where they keep the animals. This is all close by as well. They just want it right on the outskirts of their shelter. All right, so now we have sort of the first settlements, villages of people. As I mentioned, there's this one, Çatalhöyük, which was in Turkey, Jericho, which is in Israel. And we're going to talk about those more in class too. As well, we have clothing's changing. People now are domesticating sheep. They can make wool. From wool, you can spin it into thread and make cloth. So that's what people are wearing now. As well, because we are entering into the Iron Age, we have people working with metals and they're making jewelry, and that will also shape their tools as well. That's going to be super important. So life has changed a lot between the Paleolithic and Neolithic ages. So it's a pretty exciting time because of this agricultural revolution. It's changing the world and how people live. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. Thank you for your time and attention, and see you in class. Bye-bye.